Hola y buenos dias to my girls, gays, and theys. I'm your host, Taina, and you are tuning in to Chismology 101, Episode 1. Today is Friday, October 31st, 2025, and I am reporting from the brown and beautiful city of Los Angeles, California. To those who celebrate, happy Scorpio season. And to those who also celebrate today, happy Halloween. A little bit about me. My name is Taina. I am the proud daughter of Latin American immigrants from Colombia and El Salvador. So I am a multicultural Latina, a colomdoreña, as I like to call myself. I am also a millennial 90s baby. I grew up in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. To date myself a little bit, I was alive and remember the Northridge earthquake. To my niece and nephew, that is prehistoric. Growing up in the Northeast San Fernando Valley in the early 90s, I was one of few Latinas in my neighborhood and in a household who was very much influenced by Latin American culture. On top of that, we are in Los Angeles. We are surrounded by our beautiful Chicano family. And so my uncle married a Mexican woman. So I grew up with half Mexican cousins, eating Mexican food in my tia's kitchen, kicking it with their cousins. They have since moved to another state, but when I did have my cousins here, I was surrounded by Mexican culture because of my tia. And so I always ask my parents, right, like, how come we don't eat these foods or celebrate, these cultural holidays? And my parents would explain to me, mommy, somos colombianos, somos salvadoreños, it's a different Latin American culture. And as a kid, I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? And so I think that definitely started the root of, I don't want to call it a Latin American identity struggle, but I felt like that other kind of Latina, like I'm not Chicana and, I'm not fully South American and I'm also, not fully Central American. And so into my childhood and teens, I spent it struggling not just with my cultural identity, right, but my sexual identity. I am a proud queer Latina woman. I am a proud lesbian in the queer community. So concepts of cultural, sexual identity, racial identity definitely enforce my academic background, but that is not where I started, y'all. I did not start in academia. I always tell my homies and my students that I fucked around and ended up in higher education because your girl barely graduated high school. When I attempted community college in the early 2000s, I dropped out of that and had an array of different employment and jobs. One of which my favorite was Saddle Ranch. So if any of my Saddle Ranch family are listening, just know that you are a loved part of my 20s and I hold it very dear in my heart. Just remember, y'all, it does not exist anymore, but this was Saddle Ranch City Walk. And so you do not know the unfiltered early Insta, just adios motherfucker and a whole liter type of chaos on that mechanical bull that Saddle Ranch was. And then I spent a lot of my early 20s moving around Southern California in different situationships, relationships, right? All while dealing with addiction, not just to substances, to people, and addiction to people pleasing, which we will definitely break down later down the line in this podcast. However, I want to thank some roommates that I had at the time when I was living in San Diego, California. They were attending UC San Diego. And so we would just all come home, them from school and me from work. We'd all just rip the bong and talk social and gender theory. And they would always encourage me to go back to school. And I'd be like, no, it's okay. Definitely not sociology. Which is funny because my dad majored in sociology when he was a college student in Colombia. And so I'm going to say that my academic journey first began when I accidentally ended up at one of my roommates' campuses, sitting in one of their social classes. I absolutely loved it and ended up deciding to move back to LA to go to community college. And I attended Los Angeles Valley College. Shout out Monarchs. I was a transfer, non-traditional returning student. I was in my mid to early 20s, taking, not even even 101 courses, just like the most basic level, like math and English. And I became really involved with my college campus community and student body because, again, I was an older transfer student. I had experience, like what it's like to have a job and being responsible with my time. And those transferable skills definitely helped me in community college. They supported me to transfer to UC Santa Cruz, where I earned my degrees in sociology and Latin American studies. Out of college, I just continued working in higher education, particularly in student affairs. That led me from Santa Cruz to Berkeley, UCLA. I taught special education for a little bit. And now in my current role, I am the Assistant Director of Student and Community Engagement for a private liberal arts college in Los Angeles. And outside of my work in student affairs, I do community work in the nonprofit sector. I volunteer and serve on the board of directors for a couple nonprofits here in the San Fernando Valley. And so it's really been beautiful to come back to Los Angeles as an adult after moving around, right? First personally, then because of my career. I'm back in LA with my partner, doing this amazing work, and it feels, really fulfilling to give back to my hometown in that way. And so I want to get into a little bit more chisme. So, what is Chismology 101? What is Chismology? Great question. Well, the purpose of this podcast is to create a safe learning space to discuss Latina history, culture, politics, society, y todo el chisme in between, because we know that there is. You can definitely say that Chismology was founded on the intersection of chisme and theory. Chisme, because in the eyes of patriarchy, anytime a group of women congregate and just come together, I feel like men automatically think that we are gossiping. And while sure that may be true, we are not those type of chismosas. I want to quickly cite a phrase coined by Locatora Radio's host Diosa Fem and Mala Muñoz from 2017, and that is ethical chisme. In episode 10, they make it a point to differentiate between a metiche, who is intrusive and rooted in surveillance, versus a chismosa, who is perhaps sharing knowledge with the community. Ethical chisme is rooted in resource sharing. Femmes, queers, trans folk have been using ethical chisme as a praxis to keep our community safe. Not only is it an act of solidarity, but we are reclaiming it. I believe Chismology is rooted in Latiné neo-feminist theory. Don't know what that is? That's okay. Latina neo-feminist theory is our everyday and ever-evolving experiences as Latina femmes. Influenced by sociology and cultural anthropology, we'll be using theoretical frameworks of the social sciences to process and discuss the current world that we are living in. But do not let this academic jargon intimidate. Again, this is Chismology 101, so you can consider this your new fave 101 intro class. Why and who was this podcast started for? I always tell my homies who are looking to get back into education that you cannot spell scholar without chola. So this podcast is for all the Latina baddies and homegirls from the neighborhood who are tuning in. This is my love letter for children of immigrants, las rebeldes, the black sheep of the family, because Lord knows I'm mine. This is for the ones who ran away to find their voice, or to the people who are still looking to find their voice and who just want community. But personally, I would not be who I am today had it not been for my village of Latina, BIPOC, femme, queer, and trans folk who have held me like family in the darkest moments of my life and still saw the light in me. Y'all know who you are, and this is a safe space for us. If you've stayed on this long, that wraps up episode 1 of Chismology 101. Thank you so much for tuning in. ¿Quieren más chisme? Episode 2 will be airing on November 27th, where we will be discussing the decolonization of El Día del Pavo, creating a safe space to have critical conversations around Thanksgiving as a holiday, as well as its national significance. Lastly, if you've wondered how or why I've gone this long without mentioning that today, October 31st, also happens to be my birthday. Well, that's because this was my birthday present to myself. This podcast has been years in the making, and y'all can definitely ask my friends who I did not shut up about it to. This podcast is a gift of me stepping into my 34th year of life and unafraid to try something new and fail and even look dumb. And honestly, it's been so much fun, so no regrets. But I think this is a year I stopped silencing the creative outlet inside of me that is dying to plug into the community that this podcast could bring, especially at a time like this. In the words of writer, scholar, and our queer elder, Audre Lorde, without community, there is no revolution. And this is what I want this podcast to bring. A space that feels safe, rooted in community, rooted in badass chingona queer folk. And I just want you to help me wish me and Chismology 101 a happy birthday and motherfucking Scorpio season by following and sharing this podcast across all platforms with your girlies, with your lovers, y tu comadre más chismosa, because the tea is only getting hotter, nenas. Ciao.